Psychotherapist. It is Sunday night here in Canada in the US, and it's probably Monday morning over in Australia. So I'm trying to figure out the times for live streams that would work best for all of us because we are kind of becoming a global community, which is awesome. The first day, I had a lot of people request to join the group. I woke up and there was like 20, 30 people requesting because it had hit Australia. So that was awesome to wake up, and welcome to the group. I'm Dr. Barbara Woods, and I'm the kind of the host of the group and the leader of that community. So I am a psychotherapist in private practice in Manitoba, Canada. And for those of you who aren't that familiar with Canada, if you're familiar with the US, we're right above North Dakota. If you're only familiar with North America, we're kind of smack dab right in the middle of it. So today is it's a holiday weekend. It's Labor Day tomorrow. I don't believe it's a holiday over in Australia, so maybe I will catch you. I think it's about 9 o'clock there. Maybe I'll catch you before you get your day started. So today's live stream comes to us from a question that one of our community members posted on the Ask Dr. Barbara post on Friday. And it's Amy asked, have you supported educational professionals in understanding these important concepts, meaning trauma, attachment, and resilience? And if so, what have you found successful in spreading this important information? So I have worked when I immigrated up to Canada. I worked as a school psychologist in 2 different divisions for probably a total of about 7 years. So have a lot of experience in a smaller geographic area, just in southern Manitoba, and that. So I worked in those 2 school divisions. When I worked on reserve, I did spend a lot of time in the school, not as a school psychologist, but as a therapist in the community. So I regularly consulted with teachers and staff there as well. I have provided workshops on children's mental health and mindful leadership for teachers and staff in school settings. And currently, I regularly consult with schools about the behavior difficulties that certain kids that we have in our practice are experiencing, and trying to help them either develop strategies for classroom management or to help keep things consistent between the environments, because we want our interventions to blossom and grow. So the more consistency we have across settings, the better that works. So I believe that teachers, there's 2 different things that need to happen. Teachers need to know, they need to have information, but they also need to do. They need to make some changes and make some different types of interventions that would be useful. So first, we're going to talk about the basic information that's helpful for them to understand. And this is really a general overview. This whole month is Educational Resilience Month, so we'll be talking about this quite a bit. So I'll break this down into more specific pieces as we go through the month. So basically, what teachers need to know to be kind of trauma informed in the classroom is basic understanding of trauma, attachment, and resilience. So basically, that amounts to the window of tolerance, if you're familiar with that concept, where in the middle, if you have like this screen, the middle is the window of tolerance where we're cool, calm, collected. We can connect with other people. We feel good. We feel centered. Everything's good. Above the window of tolerance is hyperarousal, where that's fight or flight. And below the window of tolerance is freeze, fall asleep, feign death, faint, kind of disconnection. So it's important for them to look for and know these different states of the nervous system and what they might be seeing in their classrooms. And it's important for them to know that when dysregulation happens and a person goes up into fight or flight mode, their body will try to resolve or recalibrate, but it usually goes down into freeze, and they get kind of dreamy, or they daydream or can't concentrate. They can't understand concepts. So they can have this wild up and down that's outside of that window of tolerance all day long sometimes. With attachment, I believe attachment is just as important for teachers to know about as it is trauma, because any kind of trauma impacts your relationships by nature. But the developmental trauma or attachment breakdowns and disruptions will have a huge impact on the classroom and the ways that kids interact with teachers. So if you follow the interpersonal neurobiology model, they basically talk about those 4 types that are secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. And they usually don't have trouble with the kids who are avoidant. They just don't approach them. They don't engage with teachers. They don't engage with other staff. They maybe engage with other peers, but not too much. If they're anxious, they will know it because it's the student that's at their desk asking, is this right? Did I do this right? Where are you going? Why were you gone so long? All that kind of stuff. And the disorganized ones are the more complicated ones who will end up kind of needing help in pulling someone in. But the moment they feel like that person has gotten in and is close, they push them away, or they become dysregulated and can go into that fight or flight mode. So a teacher will be like, all I did was offer to get him a sandwich and he like freaked out on me. Well, it may be because offering him a sandwich is a nurturing act that might feel too intimate or close, and not anything inappropriate, but too relationally intimate for that child to tolerate. So they react really negatively. And those are the more complicated ones to deal with in a classroom. I have seen kids like this that everybody thinks that they're so tough because they fight and they can be very disruptive, very mean, bossy, belligerent, moody, all that kind of stuff. But if you can connect with them, and like in the therapist's office, when we go over these incidents that happen, you'll find it was a relational slight. It was something like the teacher looked at the person like, what are you so happy about? Because they weren't part of the surprise or the treat that everybody was getting. And that slight will stick with that kid that has that disruptive attachment style. With resilience, what's important for teachers to know is that children who are resilient have fought a hard battle. Resilience is not learned or gained. It can be learned or gained prior to anything happening, and it helps offset the trauma. However, true resilience is born out of really difficult circumstances. So the fact that kids aren't resilient is just telling us that they've gone through difficult circumstances and they haven't come through the other side yet, so they need our help and support. So trauma and attachment have a huge impact on learning and behavior. So the hyper-aroused states that are above the window of tolerance can look like ADHD. They can cause like gaps in memory. They can cause difficulty settling, applying concepts, transfer of information. And the hypoarousal that is more where they just kind of check out, they're daydreaming. They might look like inattentive ADD, but it's more related to the experience of trauma. So it's really important to make sure you have a really firm understanding of ADHD and trauma and how they overlap, and then how they are very different from each other as well. Also, I think I might do a live stream basically on how trauma and attachment affect learning in the classroom, because that's a really big topic that would probably be very important for some teachers to kind of pick out some of these things, and for school counselors to be able to discuss this with the teachers. Another thing that is going to kind of not go over well with teachers is that we need to move away from behavior management. And there's a really good reason for this. Behavior management is basically when a teacher rewards or consequences a student for engaging in a certain behavior. So they get disruptive, they're removed from the classroom. They don't do their homework, so they lose their recess, or those kinds of things, those consequences and rewards. Where these go awry for kids with trauma and attachment, kids with attachment difficulties already have suspicion that people don't care about them, or they're not going to be loved, or they may even be afraid to get close to somebody. So if you initiate a separation by removing the child from the classroom, it confirms their fears that they're not loved, they're not cared for, and their needs won't be met, so that when they come back, it'll be more difficult to get that behavior under control. So it usually tends to spiral when behavior strategies are used. Not all behavior strategies are to be avoided. It's the ones that are based on separation that trigger that separation complex that floods the child with anxiety because now they're being taken out of the classroom or they're being pushed away from the teacher. And kids who have trauma difficulties, generally they don't feel safe. So if they get in trouble for doing something and get removed from the classroom, trauma always impacts relationships. So they end up feeling like it just kind of exacerbates the difficulties. What is a better strategy is to use relationally based interventions. So trying to build that relationship with the child, maybe knowing that on the way to gym class, they totally dysregulate because they're anxious about changing into gym clothes or about having to perform or whatever their anxiety might be about. So maybe asking them to go quickly to gym class a little bit early so they can get ready, or they can bring a note to the gym teacher, things like that. Are some really simple strategies that sometimes help teachers. And moving away from behavior management is another live stream that I could do. I could probably do that for a whole month. But those are some of the pitfalls with using behavior management. The interventions are much better if they're relationally based and if they build the relationship rather than support a separation. So teachers also need really simple and effective strategies. They need things that they can do on the fly. They are tasked with managing 24, 25, sometimes more, not usually less, but they're tasked with managing all these behaviors. You've got kids that have learning disabilities, but no behavior problems. You've got highly dysregulated behavior problems. You've got the kids that are just totally checked out to not even participating really. They have a wide range of things to manage, and we're going to talk about that when we get down to what they need to do. And they also need support to use these strategies. So just having the strategies and applying them in your classroom isn't going to be effective if the teacher that they move to next or an aide in the classroom or somebody isn't following the same structure and interventions, or if they kind of sabotage it. That can happen. So they really need the support to use these strategies, and sometimes having a school-wide system to address these difficult behaviors in the classroom related to trauma and attachment can be the best intervention, because then the school becomes more of a healing place. So one of the things that I think we do need to understand, if we look at Polyvagal Theory, that's the theory of the autonomic nervous system, that it's the same thing as the window of tolerance, but it's kind of arranged differently based on how the nervous system operates. There's a calm, cool, collected at the top. Then there's the fight or flight. So that's kind of a yellow zone or caution or warning. And then if fight and flight don't work, the student will go into a freeze, fall asleep, disconnect, dissociate. those disconnections and dissociations, that freeze, doesn't typically happen unless the fight or flight hasn't worked. So when you have a child that is acting out and says, get away from me, get out of here, the thing that you should do is give them space and back up. What I find a lot of people do is that whole behavior management and having classroom kind of control ends up causing them to want to step forward and get control of the situation and the child's behavior, but it puts too much pressure on that autonomic nervous system, and it causes them to, then they'll fight. They'll first try to flight, then they'll fight, and if fighting doesn't work, then they'll freeze or fall asleep. So the children, the quiet child with the trauma history that's kind of checked out, struggling to learn, is actually more of a concern and more risk than the child that's acting out. That acting out behavior is actually a form of resilience. They're keeping their nervous system from bottoming out, which is really contrary to how we typically view behavior. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. So there is a comment, says, hello. So in groups, the software that we use for live streaming, it won't pull the person's information with it. So that's why there's this kind of gray silhouette person and just the hello. So I will go back in after the live stream and respond to the comments. But thank you for saying hello. So we covered that. I had a lot more lower thirds that I could have used, but we will go to my top strategy for teachers in the classroom. So the main thing that teachers need to do is they know this already, that they are under extreme pressure to make sure that all this variance of child behavior, learning styles, learning needs, they're under a lot of pressure to make sure that they can meet every single child's needs within the classroom and through the curriculum. So that is a huge amount of pressure. So understanding and validating how stressful teaching actually is really important. Classroom management, I actually, my hat goes off to class teachers who can manage a classroom, because it's not an easy job. So when they have pretty good classroom management, but a few children are acting out, that teacher may need quite a bit of support. And one of the most effective things I have found to help teachers is to help them to learn to self-monitor their own window of tolerance. When you think about teaching, their cognitive capacity and their executive functioning is completely maxed out for 7 to 8 hours a day. They have eyes in the back of their head to see and kind of know which students are up to something. They're thinking about what they have to do the next lesson. They're thinking about where they want students to go. They're thinking about where they were before. So there's all of this planning, organizing. Their executive functioning is totally maxed out. So learning to monitor, so that takes a lot of cognitive energy. And when you're doing things like that, little tiny things can really set your nervous system off. So if they learn to monitor their own window of tolerance and learn kind of where they're at and what is happening within them, their reactivity will be lower, and they will be able to more effectively talk to and intervene with kids and maintain that relational base of like classroom management and discipline and those kinds of things. So if they can self-monitor their own window of tolerance, it will widen their window of tolerance. And then when a child is acting out, they can anchor right into their own window of tolerance. So when you put an anchor in your window of tolerance and a child starts to dysregulate and they get hyper aroused, if you don't react and don't try to force that situation, the child will co-regulate with you and will come into your window of tolerance. So you can use your own lack of reactivity to help them calm down. And I have, on my caseload, I have some kids that go to a certain school that they are dumbfounded by the principal, because as kids get more and more worked up and angry and start yelling and swearing, he gets calmer and calmer and calmer. And that's what he's actually doing. He's anchoring in his window of tolerance so that the reactivity doesn't become like everybody's maxing out. He anchors in so that it co-regulates the student and it helps calm them down. And these kids, like, they respond really well to him. They don't respond well to the teachers who get louder, bigger, more forceful when they're in a little bit of a tangle. They do much better with people who will stay calm, down-regulate, and allow space, because they're in that flight or fight thing. And if you give them room to get some emotional relief through flight, they won't go into fight and they won't end up going into freeze. So teachers who have fewer difficulties are typically relationally based, and they typically view the relationship with the student as very important, as opposed to having control over that student, which is a really big thing to ask a teacher when they have 24 of them that they actually have to keep in control. But it's kind of a paradox. The more relationally based you are, the less control you have to need, because they will want to please you based on that relationship. Our little disorganized attachment guys and girls will be a little bit different because they could be triggered when you are close to them. So that's a little bit of a difference. So when a teacher practices presence, attunement, and resonance, and the students feel safe, seen, heard, they know that their teacher gets them, they know that the teacher knows them and understands them, there are fewer, they gain greater trust of the student, and they have less behavioral difficulties. Even the students who have huge difficulties will have fewer difficulties because of the teacher using those relationally based strategies and having that presence, attunement, and resonance. So one of the things that I did with a group of teachers in one school that had seen a spike in emotional and mental health difficulties is I taught them about the emotional and mental health difficulties, but also taught them about mindful leadership. So this is using a mindfulness practice in a leadership position in order to have positive influence, have clarity, have purpose and presence and all those things. And it also helps you anchor in that window of tolerance. One thing that I did with them is I had them do a calendar meditation. So they brought their timetable and I led them through just some breath awareness. And then I had them look at their calendar and look at each day and notice the sensations in their body and when those sensations became uncomfortable and when they were comfortable. So it's kind of, in meditation, you kind of not want to judge the sensations, but this is kind of using those sensations to find the spots on the calendar that are difficult. And some of the teachers were shocked at how certain classes, they just felt the pit of their stomach. And this would make it more difficult for them to stay within their window of tolerance. So that's a strategy that I've used with teaching them to understand their own kind of reactivity and where they may be at higher risk for not being able to stay in their own window of tolerance. So another thing would be to create a mindful leader milieu in the whole school. So some of the strategies work student-specific, classroom, and then the school overall. And if you create a culture of mindful leadership, it is much different to walk into a school that is based on collaboration, relationship, rather than control and that kind of stuff. Not saying that you let kids run all through the hallways, because we can't do that either. But that is is it's a much more comfortable place. Kids are more likely to be able to stay in their window of tolerance if the milieu is one of mindful leadership with the teachers. So I see there is another comment from someone. So thank you for the comments. I will stay on for a couple minutes and just see if there are any questions or any comments as we're watching. Just feel free to type in a comment below the live stream and I'll respond to it. It'll probably pop up, but you will have confidentiality because Facebook is protecting your identity with in groups. So one thing that I'm really happy to see, we had a post this morning about what to call an intervention other than homework, or I can't remember the exact words, but it was other than homework or other than an assignment. And several community members actually responded and had some great ideas. So that is part of what this group is for, is to get ideas from each other and to build a community and to have a place to come to and ask those questions, because I don't know where everybody else practices, but I'm in a very rural environment. It's a private practice. It's very isolating. So I can't go in a grocery store, a gas station, a hospital, medical clinic without seeing probably 3 to 4 clients at least. So your social life becomes very constricted. Have to really make sure that that is part of your own resilience and well-being. But that's part of what this group can do, is it can be a place where if we have questions and have things that we need answers to, where we can help each other in that way. So I got a thumbs up from someone. I'll find out who that is, and I will thank you personally when the live stream's over. Thank you very much. And someone said that they love that I spoke about strategies for educators. Thank you. Educators are a huge force in these kids' lives, and they have such impact. And a lot of the kids that I work with there's one school that is like a K to, I think 6 or K to 5, and then 6 to 8 is at another school, and 9 to 12 is at a different school. So I have a girl that had gone to the K to 5 school, went on to the middle school, and then every day before she would walk. Every day she went to school, she'd stop at the elementary school, and she stopped to see a particular teacher. And that teacher was somebody that she had made like a Valentine's Day card, and the teacher was just so warm and appreciative and loved it. And that is a person that will have influence in that little girl's life for probably forever, because of how she was treated. Trauma and attachment's a piece of that puzzle. So it's really important that our teachers have these strategies and know how to support these kids, because really they're with them 8 hours a day, which is actually more than their parents will be at different parts of their lives. So strategies for teachers is really important. I will be doing some other information on that. If you have any specific ideas that you would like to have covered, you can drop them in a comment below the video, and I'll make sure to somehow capture those in another live stream. So I want to thank you very much if you're watching live or if you're on the replay, and I hope you have a beautiful day.